There are levels of observances that exist in the Jewish world, in halacha, and in society. And so the primary level is naturally the mitzvos min Torah, the Taryag mitzvos that the Torah ordains for us. Then the Gemara lists 7 more mitzvos that are midrabanan, that are also obligatory upon us, but they are, to a certain extent, less stringent than the mitzvahs d'oraisa, because the sofek, the mitzvah d'rabanan is lahokel. One is in doubt. Then there's another level, which is that of societal behavior, which is neither a mitzvah min Torah, nor is it a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. It's just the way Jews behave and do things. And we call that minhagim, customs that we have. And people are very loath to give up on customs. They are very stringent on customs. I've often remarked to you the famous quip of Rabbi Yaakov Emden, who said that it's too bad, he said, that Lotignov is not a minhag, because then the observance would be more widespread. Now, minhagim, customs, arise. Now the question is, where do they arise from? Do they arise within the Jewish people from Jewish sources? Or do they come from the outside? Especially true when the Jews were in the exile, because if you live for hundreds and hundreds of years in a certain society, then the customs and behavior of that society naturally impacts upon the Jewish people as well. And so then that's a question. So for instance, the Tosefta in Shabbos, in the 8th parak in Shabbos, the Tosefta lists for us all sorts of customs that existed in the time of the Talmud, many of which still exist today in the non-Jewish world. And they are basically superstitions. And the Gemara calls it Darkei Emori. This is the way the Emori behaved, but they are forbidden to us. So there are well-known superstitions, like the numbers like 13, or a black cat, or walking under a ladder. All of this is mentioned in the Tosefta. These superstitions are thousands of years old. And because life is uncertain, and to a great extent it's irrational, so people, by their very nature, buy into these things. And they hold stock in them. And they think they're important. So we have a minhag, it'll be tonight, tomorrow, of Kaparos, erev Yom Kippur. So there is a very strong disagreement amongst the poskim whether this is a legitimate minhag. The Aruch HaShulchan goes so far as to say that any rov that would be successful in his community to end that custom, he said, I will defend him in this world and in the next. However, it must be said that even though there is such strong halachic authority that opposes the minhag is almost universal amongst the Jewish people. And the minhag is expanded. It's interesting, there's a Rashi in the 8th Perek in Shabbos. Rashi quotes something that he heard from his teachers, that the Gaonim in Bavel said that there was a custom amongst Jews that they would plant in a flower pot vegetation, flowers, and they would bury it in the ground, the flower pot, and they would take it out erev Rosh Hashanah, and they would say, "Zeh chalifosi zeh tmurasi." This is instead of me. I uproot the flower pot, the plant, but that I will not be uprooted in the coming year. So Rashi quotes there was such a minhag, which already resembles our custom of Kaparos. But especially in Europe, the minhag morphed into taking roosters, chickens, and taking the chicken and slaughtering it. And then they would say the statement, "Ze chalifosi, ze purosi, ze kaparosi, ze atarnegol yelech lemisa." The chicken is going to be slaughtered, but I am going to aniyah chones l'chaim tovim v'aruchim. It's a kapora for me. Now this is based on an idea that the Ramban says. The Ramban, when he discusses animal sacrifices at the beginning of Chumash Vayikra, so he asks, well, what is all of that about? What is slaughtering the animal do, so to speak, for me? How do we view it? So he says the idea that we already see that by Yakedah, we see that by Yitzchak, that Avraham sacrificed the ayil. In other words, he knew he had to bring a sacrifice, and the Malach told him that the sacrifice cannot be Yitzchak. So therefore, he saw the ayil nechaz basvach bekarnov, that the ram was entwined there, and he slaughtered the ram. So the ram became the kapora, so to speak, for Yitzchak, and it ended the idea of human sacrifice as far as the Torah was concerned. But the Ramban says a second idea there. And the Ramban says that when a sacrifice is offered, one should see that the person himself who brings the sacrifice should really be the sacrifice. A person brings a korban chatas, he did something wrong, so he's liable, he's responsible. So by killing the animal, he's really killing himself. The only thing is that the Lord is merciful. Ki lo sachbos b'mo sameis, ki im b'shuva medarko v'choya. And therefore the sacrifice is, so to speak, a kapora from which we are able to advance and repent and become greater. So in Eastern Europe especially, the minhag of kaporas with chickens was very widespread. And there the poskim bring that they should do it because this is going to be the meal on erev Yom Kippur, and that the chicken should be the edible parts should be given to the poor, should be given to soup kitchens. It should be eaten. And the parts that people don't like to eat, like the intestines, the gizzards, etc., should be given to animals and to birds. So it's seen as a benefit, a means of bringing a benefit to, because of the fact that if you base it purely on charitable motives, so then maybe people wouldn't do it. But when you elevate it to the idea of it being a Kaparot for you, so then people certainly will do it, and then the poor people will have what they eat, etc. Then it advanced further because of Kabbalistic ideas, but also because of the superstitions of the time. So it had to be a white chicken, it had to be a rooster with a red crop. So there already almost all the poskim say that should be ignored. That's not Jewish at all. That's already Darkei Amori, that's superstitions. The color of the chicken, forget all of that. Nevertheless, I noticed that in the shuk they charge more for white ones than for those that are not. Especially if it has a piton. So so in Lithuania, the non-Hasidic, the Chassidim took on the minhag very strong, as do the Sephardim as well. But the Lithuanians modified the minhag completely. They said not to take a chicken, to use money, and that is a Gemara that one is allowed to say, I'm giving this money to charity because I want life for me and my family. That's perfectly permissible. So therefore, the kaparas in those areas were downgraded, so to speak, to money. And people say, and this because of the fact that we're giving the tzedakah, so that becomes the kapara for me as well. And so these are the basis for this minhag as that exists today. And as I mentioned, it's very widespread amongst the Jewish people. And since Rashi mentions it, so it's and he says it's from the time of the Gaonim, it's a very ancient minhag. So it must have some roots amongst the Jewish people, even though not in its present form. And therefore, almost all of Klal Yisrael is noeg to be Mekayim this minhag tonight and tomorrow. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Yomer, Otza Kodesh Baruch Hu L'Zakas Yisrael, Fil Hiberland Torah Mitzvot Shenemar,
Iskadesh, Mei Rabba, Yom Adigur B'Sei Yom Lichmoch B'Sei, Hayechol Yom Echol Chaliko Beis Yisrael, Bagal Azman Karev Amen. Hey, Shnei Rabba, Olam Lamer Mayol, Baruch Shabbat Yisrael, Yisrael Yisnasei, Yisrael Yisrael Yisrael, Shmei B'Kudsha B'Yichol. Eila Leila, min kol b'chas v'yeshua, tzachis b'chas nechumasa, tameram be'alma v'yilu amen. Al Yisrael, Rabban, Mochas Lichon, Al kol Tamanitam Lichon, Al kol man de'oskim b'yavaisa, v'yos kedisha dengi b'kol asar v'yasar. Hello, Nechon Shlam Rabba.